Yes, here we go. I'm Jacob Clifford. I am your online economics teacher that's been helping you out, getting you ready for the AP exam. I'm super excited that you guys are here. First, let's do some shout outs to you. People are saying the GOAT. I hope you're talking about me. Another person said hype. I think that's a compliment. I will take that. Let me know where you're from. If, I hope I am saving your lifey. I'm here to help. That's the goal. My goal is to help you learn and love economics. This is going to be a short review session, so we'll be at least an hour. If you need longer, we'll go longer. So I'll talk about what we're going to do in a second. I'm excited. We're going to go. That's right. All right. So here's the plan. The video is going to start with a quick overview, some basic ideas. I'm going to give you some practice multiple choice questions, a self-assessment, and then I'm going to move on to the questions and the answers. So I'll talk about things like Mr. DARP, and I'm just excited. I'm ready to go. I hope you guys are excited to go and cover this stuff. So as people come in, let's jump into it. First thing, if you didn't already get the Ultimate Review Packet, you should. It's going to help you with the other classes as well. Stats is awesome. We've got chemistry, physics, all the other subjects that you need. So go take a look at the Ultimate Review Packet when you got a little bit of time. All right. That said, let's jump into what we're going to do today. So first things first, let's start with a thank you. I really appreciate that. I really thank you so much for watching my videos. I know I've helped you a lot, but you've helped me a lot, ad revenue and revenue from Ultimate Review Pack. But at the end, I just love teaching students and I love economics. This is an amazing course and I wish you all the best of luck. We're going into battle though. This is going to be a hard test. This is a tough one and I'm going to get you ready today. So that's what the plan is. A couple things, like I said, we're going to start with a quick overview, some basic ideas I want to cover. I boiled down microeconomics into four things that if you can do these things, you're going to be fine. Definitions, rules, graphs, and shifters. And the last one is equations. So what do I mean by that? What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to give you a list of things that you should know. And if you don't know them, don't freak out. Remember, you're not trying to get 100%. It's okay if you don't know everything, but the things to go back and look at, like, because you got less than 24 hours to get ready for the test, or just to give you kind of a self-assessment, like, yeah, I think I'm ready. I've covered these things. So I'm going to go over each of these things. What I mean by definitions, what do I mean by rules, what do I mean by graphs and shifters and equations. So that's what I'm going to talk about real quick here. First, let's get rid of that. And then let's jump into these things. First, the definitions. What do I mean by definitions? This morning, what I did is I sat down and I went over the test again. I took the whole test because I want to get it back in my brain for our review session. And I realized there's some things you have to have definition-wise. Now, this class is not big into definitions like AP Psych, but you need to know definitions like price discrimination. If you don't know price discrimination or antitrust laws, then you're like, well, I can't even answer this question. So here's my question. Do you know these definitions? I'm not going to necessarily go over each one of them, but I'm trying to throw them at you and then write on a little note if there's things you have to go back and look at. Increasing versus constant opportunity cost. Constant opportunity cost is a straight line production possibilities curve, and increasing is a bowed out or a curved production possibilities curve. Do you know that definition? There were questions on the test about market versus command economies. Market economies, individuals own the factors of production. In command economies, the government controls those. The law of diminishing marginal utility, as you buy or consume any additional thing, you're going to get less and less additional satisfaction. Again, I don't need to go over the definitions of these. What I want to do is throw them at you to see if you know them. Like, what's a normal good and inferior good? If you don't know what inferior good is right now, if you have no idea what inferior good is, go look that up, right? Go understand that concept. Consumer surplus, producer surplus. There was a question literally just on, do you know what consumer surplus is? The idea of dead weight loss, the law of diminishing marginal returns, economies of scale, the characteristics of four market structures. You're going to have at least one question, maybe two, that just ask you, which of the following is a characteristic of monopolist competition? Or which of the following does monopolist competition and perfect competition have in common? So if you know those characteristics, you're going to be fine on those questions. What is price discrimination? Dominant strategy, just what is it? Remember, we'll get to the payoff matrix. We'll get to the other concepts. We're just talking about definitions here. What is a monopsony, right? A monopoly for labor, antitrust laws, public goods, and understanding the idea of non-exclusion and shared consumption, and then the different types of taxes, progressive, proportional, and regressive. I'm throwing these at you. Woo! The question is, can you catch them? Can you take them and say, yeah, I know it. I know the different types of taxes. These are the easiest questions on the test. The ones that'll say which This example is they give you a tax is an example of what type of tax, progressive, proportional, aggressive, or whatever. And then it's really easy if you just know the definition. So make sure you know the definition of these concepts. That's the first of 4 things. What I want to do right now, because I can, is give you some examples. So I don't want to be in theory mode. I want to give you some examples of what I'm actually talking about. So let's go talk about some examples like this. All right, here's an actual test question from the AP exam. I want to throw this at you. Now, I'm starting off with the easiest one I possibly can. So feel free to jump on that. Okay. If a market has 4 firms that control the vast, the vast majority of the market, 88%, then this is an oligopoly. The answer is D. Notice if you didn't know the definition of oligopoly, you're done. You're cooked. It doesn't help you. You're done. So you do need to know some definitions, even though this is an example of one of the easiest questions in the test. This percentage right here, 81%, is the number of students who got this right in 2019. So that's an easy one. You should get these ones right. It's the lowest hanging fruit. So these definition questions are usually easiest. Sometimes they get a little trickier, like this one. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on these. If you really want to pause the video, you can. Again. So for this one, the economic concept of total consumer surplus refers to which of the following? This is a definition question. Do you know the definition of consumer surplus? That's what it's asking. Notice there's also other skills you have to do. You have to be able to calculate consumer surplus. So if I gave you a graph and I said, where's consumer surplus? You have to calculate that triangle. That's another skill that you have to feel comfortable with. But this is an example of what I'm talking about when I talk about definitions. The right answer one here is right here, C. The sum of the difference between the price consumers are willing to pay and the price they actually pay. Again, you should be able to see the definition. You should be able to spot it on a market graph. So if I drew demand and supply, you should be able to say, okay, that's the area of consumer surplus. And you should be able to calculate it if I gave you numbers. Those are the skills we're talking about. Can you do those things? Can you do it? Let me know in the comments right now. Can you do this? Say, yes, I got it. That's what I want to see. Just, yes, I got it. If you can do this. That's an example of what I'm talking about when I talk about this idea of definitions. You guys got this? Perfect. Okay, let's go talk more about the next things you have to do, which are the rules. Now, I'm going to do a macro review session the day before that exam on Thursday. I'm also going to post my predictions tomorrow. The macro test is all about relationships. You can boil almost the entire class down into relationships. For micro, it's all about following the rules. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and this is really going to help solidify some ideas. There are some rules you need to know, right? Think of this. Profit maximizing rule, utility maximizing rule, a shutdown rule. If you just know the rule, then the answers become easy because you understand the rules. What do I mean by that? Here's some examples of some rules. The utility maximizing rule, these are the kind of questions when you have 2 different things you're consuming, and it gives you the total utility you get for each unit, and you have to figure out, okay, how many should I actually consume? 3 cars and 2 donuts or whatever it is. This idea of utility maximizing, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I've got a video that explains it. There's the idea of the total revenue test. This has to do with elasticity, and if the price goes up and the total revenue goes up, right? When we're inelastic demand, if price goes down, total revenue goes down. Inelastic demand. This is called the total revenue test. These are, again, rules. I'm not going over them. Remember, the goal right now is an overview. I'm still up here. So write little notes. If you have questions, like write a note to yourself. Okay, I'm going to ask about that in a few minutes when we get to our next stage, the question part. Ceilings and floors. So remember that a binding ceiling goes below equal. It's counterintuitive, right? For cross price elasticity, it's talking about substitutes and complements. For income elasticity, it's talking about normal and inferior. Now, that's not a rule. It's kind of a relationship as well. Like, you understand if you see cross price and there's something about normal goods, you're like, nah, that's not it. Cross price has to do with substitutes and complements. Other rules is marginal cost always hits the ATC at the ATC's minimum. Mathematically, it has to do that at ATC's minimum point. You know the profit maximizing rule, MR equals MC. The shutdown rule, when price falls below the AVC, you should produce nothing. Just shut down and take your fixed cost as a loss. Hopefully you understand this stuff. Again, if right now you're like, dude, I don't know this stuff, right? Well, no. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened right there. We're back in. In the long run, perfect competition firms earn no profit. That's a rule. Just understand that. So does monopolist competition. They earn no profit. For perfect competition, there's Mr. Dart, right? Demand equals marginal revenue equals the price, average revenue. For imperfect competition, the demand is greater than marginal revenue. For all of those, for price discrimination, the marginal revenue equals the demand. There's no deadweight loss and there's no consumer surplus. And then, of course, when hiring workers, use the profit maximizing hiring labor law. You always hire where MRP equals MRC. And then there's also something called the least cost rule. Again, I can talk about those details later, but these are all general rules you need to know. One more I want to mention, I think this will be on the free response, is a lump sum tax doesn't affect the marginal cost. So it doesn't affect the actual quantity. So these are all general rules. If you understand this rule, when you see a question, you'll be like, okay, I see what they're getting at with this question. Okay, let's give you some examples. Let's give you examples so it becomes a little more interactive. Here's what I got for you. There are 5 things wrong with that graph. Identify all 5 things that are wrong. It's not following the rules, right? There's 5 things that, and I didn't talk about all of them on my last slide. So let's see if you can figure out which ones they are. I'll check you guys out in the comments as you do it. I'm going to talk about wages and stuff. Some people are throwing out ideas here. Shout out to Mr. Tipton. So 5 things that are wrong with this. What is possibly wrong? Well, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Shout out to Mr. Casey. Okay. A lot of great ideas here. First one is you can see, and I'm not sure if you can actually see. It does come up. Perfect. Okay. You can see AVC and the ATC are wrong, right? The ATC is always above the AVC. In fact, the ATC equals the AVC plus the AFC. So clearly this is wrong. You can't have the ATC above. If you were to draw this, clearly wrong. There's one. Number 2, there's this minimum point right here. What the heck's going on down here? This needs to go down, hit a minimum, and then go straight back up. So this minimum point can't be here. The average total cost and the average variable cost hit the marginal cost at the minimum of those average curves. So it's got to go down, hit a minimum, then go up. So that's problem 2. Problem 3, this one's the hardest one, actually. These 2 should be getting closer and closer to each other. The average total cost and the average variable cost will get closer and closer and closer without actually touching, because in between them is the average fixed cost. So 3rd thing wrong. And of course, the price and quantity are flipped. Quantity should be down here. Price should be up here. So those are wrong. There's 5 things wrong with that. They're not following the rules. They're not following the logic of the concepts we've been covering. You know what I'm saying? Some of them are obvious, like just don't put price in the y-axis. On the x-axis. That doesn't make any sense. Don't ever do that. But be careful of those little small things. Let me give you a couple more examples, except this time, let's actually jump into a multiple choice. Now, multiple choice examples of this idea of rules. Okay. This is a hard question, so I'll give you a little time to work on it. Only 39% of the students got this one right, but it has everything to do with what I'm talking about, which is called rules. Let's see if you can figure it out. Give you a second. Not bad. That was me. Three, 2, 1. We all know the profit maximizing rule. You always produce where that equals MC. You know the rule. Just apply the rule. That's all this question's asking. It's really all it's asking. It's saying the marginal revenue is 75 or 750, and the marginal cost is 800. So it's saying the marginal revenue is 750, which is less than the marginal cost, which is 800. What do you do when the marginal cost is greater than the marginal revenue? This is bad. This is not right. They're not equal. Something's wrong here. If the way I think of it is this, is I'd actually draw this. So think of a perfectly competitive firm. So here's the horizontal marginal revenue. Here's your marginal cost. And then, okay, the marginal revenue is 750. Okay. The marginal cost is above that. So right here at this particular quantity is where we are. We're not over here. Marginal revenue is not above the marginal cost. The marginal revenue or the marginal cost is above the marginal revenue. Means we're here. What do? You produce less. The answer is C. This firm's profit would increase if the firm decreased the quantity sold. It needs to produce the profit maximizing quantity. It's producing too much. So 2 ways to get the answer. One, go to the rule and figure out, okay, something's wrong with this. They're not producing the profit maximizing quantity, right? So you knew it wasn't A. That doesn't make any sense, right? And then, of course, you can use a graph to get the right answer as well. Again, this is an example of a hard question. Only 40% or so of the students got this one right. So that's a hard question. But again, it's an example of the concept I'm trying to say, which is follow the rules. Understand the rules we've been talking about this entire year. Someone said, why not D? The firm earns negative economic profit. Since we don't have an ATC here, I mean, for all we know, ATC is down here, right? Or ATC could be up here. We don't know where ATC is. So you don't use marginal, think of it this way. Marginal cost is only used to figure out quantity. It's never, ever, 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 ever used to figure out profit. Marginal cost tells you where to produce, right? ATC tells you where the profit is. So the firm earns negative economic profit. They're making a loss? No, not necessarily. They could, if they produce here though, okay, watch this. Let's say the ATC is here. And the revenue is here. The total cost is here because they're producing this weird quantity. That's the box of profit. They can make more money by producing less output and make a bigger box of profit. Why? Because they're not profit maximizing. So the answer is not D. And zero accounting, we don't know anything about, in this case, we don't know anything about that either. The point here is this: follow the rules. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at here. If you follow the rules, you're going to be fine. I'm going to give you one more. This question was even harder. In fact, this was the hardest question on the 2019 exam. I'm only, by the way, I don't want to freak anybody out. If you're like, I'm not good at this stuff, why are you doing the hard questions? Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I shouldn't throw this at you. But it's the same. It teaches you it's actually not that hard if you follow the rules. Give you a second here. All right, here we go. I know you probably don't have the time to do this, and this is not the best use of our time. Having me sit and go over multiple choice questions is not the best use of your time. You can do that on your own time. The best use of our time is for me to keep doing what I'm doing, but I'm just showing you examples of the idea I want to show you. Okay, profit maximizing firm hires labor in a pretty competitive market, and we know in that case that the marginal revenue product equals the marginal resource cost, right? This is the profit maximizing rule for hiring workers. And that says the wage is 20. We know this is 20. So the MRP has to equal 20 if they're maximizing profit. So how do you get the MRP? Well, that's just another rule. Understanding if you want to figure out how much workers are worth, you multiply the marginal product times the price. That gives you the marginal revenue product, right? So how much output a worker produces times the price of that product tells you how much that worker generates. And it tells you that the last worker produced 10 units per hour. So that's 10 units of hour times some number gives us 20, which we already know is the MRP. The answer is $2. The answer was A. There was the answer. Again, this is one of the hardest questions on the darn test. That's it. And all you got to do is follow the rules. Understand the idea of profit maximizing when you're hiring workers. And it's like a weird way of asking. It's not your classic question, like how many workers should you hire? But if you understand the rule and you understand this idea, then this question becomes relatively easy. It's okay if you miss this. This, like I said, the hardest darn question on the test, only 22% of the students got that one right. So sorry for throwing that out at you, but I'm going to give you some easier questions in a second to help you keep practicing. Let's jump into this next part, which is the idea of the graphs and the shifters. If you didn't already take a look at it, you should get my ultimate review packet. In there is the ultimate cheat sheet. Inside there, it has all the graphs you need to know. Make sure you draw all those. Sit down, redraw those things. Take this into the AP exam with you. Walk down to the test, wherever you're taking the test in your multi-purpose room at school. Be looking at these graphs. I organize it with essential graphs first, and then additional graphs you need to know. So make sure you know that first page of graphs before you start worrying about the second page. In other words, make sure you know a monopoly, a regular monopoly, before you start worrying about a price discriminating monopoly, because there's more likely to be questions about a regular monopoly on the test. Back to this, graphs and shifters. What do I mean by that? Well, these are the graphs you're going to see. Okay, you're going to see maybe the production possibilities curve, definitely in a multiple choice question. You either see it or they'll refer to it. Obviously, demand and supply, you're going to see like 3 or 4, maybe 5 multiple choice questions with just good old fashioned, do you understand supply and demand? Understand ceilings and floors. Keep in mind the AP test is tricky. Whenever you see the word ceiling or floor, ask yourself, is it binding? Is it the right spot? Remember, ceilings go below equilibrium, floors go above. The idea of a tax, like a tax incidence, so a shift in supply, knowing the price that consumers pay and the price that producers receive, and that box of tax revenue. Obviously, you got to know the cost curves. You got to know how to both calculate them and recognize when you look at a graph what's going on. Perfect competition, the product market. This is what I think the free response will be on this year, the first free response. Side-by-side graphs. Obviously, a monopoly graph, drawing a profit, drawing a loss. Price discrimination, monopolist competition, payoff matrix for game theory, perfect competition for a labor market. So firms hiring workers, again, side-by-side graphs, but instead of a horizontal demand, it's a horizontal supply. And then externalities. Remember, there's 4 types of externalities. There's 2 consumption and 2 production externalities. Again, I'm throwing a lot of things at you as like a reminder. We're still in overview mode. I'm not getting down to the details yet. The question is, do you know how to do these? If right now you look at this, you're like, I do not know monopolist competition. I don't know how to draw the graph. I don't understand the graph. Go watch that video, get that concept back in your brain. You know you should spend some time on that. But that's the kind of thing you're going to see. Let me give you some examples and let's clear the palette from that question you saw a few moments ago. That was a bad question. It was too hard. Let's go do one that 76% of the students got right. Okay. Good old-fashioned supply and demand. This is an easy test question. You have to get this one correct. Good luck. As you're doing that, I'm going to talk just a little bit. Somebody mentioned, what about monopsony graph? Monopsony graph is not a key graph. It's not a main graph. It's on the second page of the ultimate cheat sheet. So it's a good to know? Yes, it's great to know. But is it like the most important thing to know? Absolutely not. In other words, if you don't know, if you've never heard the word monopsony in your life, you can still easily get a 5 on this test. Not a problem. So don't spend too much time on those questions that are way, way, way harder. 76% got it right. You got to know this one. Which of the following will shift the supply curve for apples to the right? That means it's going to increase supply, a decrease in the rental price of apple harvesting. So a lower price for an input means supply would shift to the right. Demand, supply shifts over. Price goes down, quantity goes up. This is the sort of thing that you should be doing on your test. You should be drawing graphs or you should be crossing things out. It's not A because that's a demand shifter, right? It's not E because that's a demand shifter. And then price never shifts the curve. Say it with me. Price doesn't shift the curve. Price of apples does not shift the graph for apples. Price moves along the curve, doesn't shift the curve. If you put that one, I mean, I could see why students would do that, but that one is wrong. Price does not shift the curve. It's one of those small things the test will always throw at you. So make sure you're on top of that. A decrease in the price of rental equipment, that's going to shift supply. An increase in wages will shift the supply, but it'll shift it the other direction. It'll be a decrease. Okay, this is an easy question. You've got to get this one right. 71% of the students did on the AP test. So here it is. A little harder to see on this one, but a monopoly. Good luck. I love how someone said price doesn't shift the curve, but the price of resources or price of inputs shifts the curve. That's correct. Price of inputs shift the curve, but the price of the product itself does not shift the curve you're looking at. The price of hamburgers does not shift the demand or supply of hamburgers. I know it's hard to do, by the way, questions on a screen. In fact, this is not the best way to do this. I'm trying to show you an idea. The idea is graphs. These are the questions you got to get right. We've got a monopoly, you got demand, marginal revenue, and it's asking where's the quantity? Well, you always produce where M equals MC. There's your Q1. So these are out, gone. Q2, Q3 are out. Next, the price. You don't charge here. That's silly. Why would it be P1? You charge what people are willing to pay. So that's P4. So this one is out. Now you've got 2 answers, B and C. Just take a guess if you need to. But for this one, you know it is the profit is down here. In fact, on your test, label that in. right? Your profit price down to the ATC and over, that gives you your box of profit. So it is P2, P4, IM. The answer is C. C is the right answer. There it is. No doubt about it. Okay. Now, what am I trying to say? You're going to see these graphs on the multiple choice. You're going to see maybe this graph on a free response. Sometimes they'll give you the monopoly. And you just got to know these simple, follow the same rules. Profit maximize, price what people want to pay, get down to the ATC to figure out the box of profit. Total revenue minus total cost gives you the box of profit. Keep in mind on this one, they actually give you letters, right? P3, P4. Other questions might give you numbers. You have to actually calculate that total revenue or calculate that deadweight loss. Those are other things you should be able to spot, right? So you should be, I mean, just for this one graph, you should be able to spot, okay, they could have asked about deadweight loss. They could have asked about consumer surplus in this question. They could have asked about socially optimal. They could have asked where total revenue is maximized. They could have asked where there's no economic profit. Like it's the same graph. It's just all different questions for the same graph. The question is, do you know that graph? Well, I hope you do. All right, let's get back into our list of things that you need to know. Last one. Actually, let me show you this real quick. In the comments right now, let me know 3 things they might ask with this graph. So this is a strategy you can use. If you saw this graph, and before you even read the question, your brain should think, okay, here's what the questions are probably on, right? So what kind of things could they ask with this multiple choice question if they gave you that graph? You know what I'm saying? So 3 things, see if you can put it in there. First person, get a comment on there. You actually just do one at a time. It's okay. You don't do them all once. What kind of things might they ask? Yes, they might ask about equilibrium, total surplus, deadweight loss if there's a ceiling or a floor, for sure. Anything else? They might ask, they probably wouldn't ask, where is equilibrium? Do you know what I'm saying? Because that's too simple, like 6 and 200. They might ask a ceiling question, right? They might ask, like I said, total surplus, producer surplus, consumer surplus. No one said one of them yet. There it is, right there. These 2 folks spot it. Taxes. They might ask you a tax question. If there's a $4 tax on this, what's the tax revenue box? Or how much do consumers pay of that tax? Do they share the tax equally? This actually, they could ask elasticity question. They can have you calculate the elasticity of demand coefficient between $8 and $6 or something like that. They could ask a world price question. I like that too. You guys know what you're talking about. Inputs and quotas. That is a possibility. Yep. Okay. That said, let's keep moving on to the next thing. The first one, let's go back up real quick. Number 1, we said there's going to be some definitions of things you absolutely need to know. Number 2, there's going to be some rules you have to follow. Profit maximizing rule, shutdown rule, utility maximizing rule. Number 3, we said there's graphs that you have to know. And of course, number 4, the last one, there are equations that you have to know as well. I got ahead of myself. Let's do this really quick. Your teacher might have done this if they had my PowerPoints. Right now, take a look at these 4 graphs. Identify which one is the correct graph for a firm earning profit in the short run. A perfectly competitive firm earning short run profit. Which one is the correct graph? I'll wait till you guys see as you get in here. Different people are offering different ideas. A firm making profit. Now, the key to this whole thing is to understand that, they all kind of look the same, right? That's the hard thing about this class is kind of look at it. And somebody who's not taking this class would see how they kind of all look the same. There's a kind of green box and there it is. So far, no one said it. Oh, Abigail's got it. Maybe a few other people did. She's the first person that popped up. The answer is none of them. None of them. They're all wrong. Every single one of these ones are horribly wrong for different reasons. So they're all wrong. So don't draw any of these if you had that question. Let's go over why. First one is that's a loss. So that's a correct graph for a loss. You got horizontal demand, marginal cost ATC, except the ATC is too high. So that's wrong. Down here, what's going on with number 2? Well, they're not producing the right quantity. They're not producing more MR equals MC. Believe it or not, that would hurt you significantly. Usually these are worth like 3 points. That would give you only 1 out of the 3 points on the free response. Because when you produce that wrong quantity, then you also get the wrong profit. So don't make that mistake. Over here, yeah, you got the right quantity, MR equals MC. You got ATC below, that's good, but the box is in a weird spot. Why is it going down to here? Right? That's not right. It should look like this bottom one, except the bottom one's wrong because the ATC and the MC are flipped, right? This is the marginal cost. That's the average total cost. That's not following the rule. Average total cost hits the marginal cost at the minimum ATC. So that's wrong. So point is this. Graphs look the same. Slow down. Don't just look at things. Watch out for those details. Okay. All right. Last thing we got to do here. Again, this is in the overview mode before I start talking about the details and answering your specific questions of the equations that you need to know. Do you know these equations? So calculating opportunity cost. Last year was the first year they had a free response with comparative advantage on the micro exam, and it blew a lot of students away. Add it to the list of things to go back and relearn and practice. So comparative advantage, can you calculate, one plane for how many cars and identify comparative advantage? Calculating marginal benefit and marginal cost, calculating consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss, the area of those triangles. The elasticity demand coefficient and the other elasticities, cross price and income elasticity. Do you know those equations? If you don't, write a little note to yourself, go back and look at them again, write them down right before you go on the AP test as well. So they're like in your brain. And then the per unit cost curves, average total cost, average variable cost, average fixed cost, marginal cost. And last one, accounting profit, economic profit, understanding that, economic profit includes all of, it has all of your costs, explicit and your implicit costs. I have a free resource. It's free. It's in the Ultimate Review Packet. If you haven't already tried this, it's a worksheet that goes over the key equations. So if you're still uncomfortable with equations, go in the Ultimate Review Packet, download this and do this, go over those answers. And I also have a key equations video that goes over those equations. So again, if you don't know any of those equations, watch that video. If you don't know the graphs, go watch my Every Graph You Need to Know video as well. All right, that said, those are the 4 things that you need to know. What I want to do is this. Let's do a self-assessment. So right now, you're completely on your own. Don't share. Don't jump in the comment section. Right now, self-assess yourself. See if you are going to get the grade that you want. I'm going to ask you some questions. The things, can you do them? If you can do them, you're good. If you can't do them, write a little note to yourself. Number 1, can you calculate marginal utility and maximize utility? So if I gave you chart, and you've got the total utility from consuming different goods, can you calculate marginal utility and use utility maximizing rule? Number 2, can you identify where that is and calculate consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss? Remember, there's a lot of examples of where you would do this. You can do it for monopoly. You can do it for externalities. You could do it for ceilings and floors and taxes. Can you explain the results of a ceilings, floor, taxes, quotas, world price with trade? Like, when I say ceiling, do you see it on the graph? Can you draw on the graph? Do you spot consumer surplus, producer surplus, deadweight loss? Can you do all those calculations for elasticity? Can you apply the profit maximizing rule in the product market? So identify how many output to produce for like perfect competition or for monopoly. Can you do the total revenue, total cost, calculate all those other cost curves? Can you spot the shutdown point, right? The minimum AVC and the short run supply curve. Can you calculate per unit lump sum or compare the two and understand, okay, when there's a lump sum tax, that's totally different when there's a per unit tax. Lump sum doesn't affect the quantity, a per unit tax does. Do you spot the inelastic, elastic range on a monopoly graph? Identify socially optimal. Can you identify dominant strategy? This is the game theory stuff. If I gave you a game theory, how good are you at doing that? Number 12, apply profit maximizing rule for hiring workers, right? Hiring where MRP equals MRC, and then actually do the calculations for those. Last one, can you draw those externalities and explain how you fix externalities? This is the course. If you sit down and look at this list, and maybe there's 2 of them you don't feel, maybe there's 4. Let's say there's 4 of them. Like, I'm just not good at that. It's okay. Breathe. It's fine. Don't freak out. If you don't know externalities, not the end of the world. You can still get a 5, but it's good time to go back and watch a video or do a calculation or do some practice with the amount of time that you have left. This is the class. So take a picture with your phone. Ask yourself, is this something that I know that I can do? If not, go back and redo these things way before, because I know it's going to happen. When I open it up for questions, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to say, who's got any questions? And you're going to have, hey, can you draw a monopsony except with a price ceiling and a price floor at the same time? And then there's also a minimum wage, and they get like crazy. It doesn't help. It's good to know. And if you were here and you were in the room with me and we were just talking, then I would answer your questions, because I want to help a student who's like trying to get like a 5, right? You're trying to get like the highest possible score. But really, for the vast majority of you, it's okay if you don't even know a monopsony graph. So I'm going to try to focus on the biggest concepts first. And that's good economics, right? It's efficient, right? If you think like if you broke a vase, right? It's smashed all over the place. How do you clean it up? Well, you pick up big pieces first. You don't focus on little tiny pieces, right? That's inefficient. You want big pieces first, then we'll wear the small pieces. So if you want to stick around and ask me really hard questions, I'll answer them later. But when I start doing Q&As, I want to do kind of bigger concepts first, bigger ideas that you need to know. Okay. So what I want to do is this. I'm going to open it up for your comments. And what I want to do is I want to go unit by unit and start talking about this stuff. And when I say unit by unit, I'm going to start in unit 1. If you don't already have this, this is inside the Ultimate Review Packet. Definitely go get this with the time you have left. It's free, and it basically gives you a rundown and a link. So you get the PDF, a link to all my different videos and all the concepts. So looking at just unit 1, let's just do that. Just unit 1 right here. Let's just go to this. What other concepts here in unit 1 that you're like, okay, I need help with? Okay, one person, and I will help you. Okay, one person, 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. It's like the easiest question on the test. Though, usually I don't ask it, but it could be something like, which of the following is the 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship? And they might say, capital, money, markets, and prices, or something stupid like that. It's land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Perfect. Human capital. Human capital is the physical capital, is like machines, tools, and factories. You know that concept. Human capital is experience, knowledge, and education, right? It's the things that we can make productivity increase by improving workers. So I can make you smarter, and that makes you produce more stuff. So that's human capital. Great. I love it. For economic systems, there are going to be a few questions on the test that are very general. They won't dive really deep. There's no calculations. They'll say, which of the following do free markets and command economies have in common? Not that many, but what do they have that are different, or something like that? But basically it's a definition question. Command economies controlled by the government, market economy is controlled by individuals and businesses making their own decisions. When it comes to comparative advantage, last year I got myself in trouble. Last year I told students it's not going to be on the free response. Don't worry about it. It's maybe be one multiple choice question, and it was on the free response, and I felt bad. You got it, just in case it's on the free response again. You should study it. I've got videos to help you practice. It's not something I can practice here because there's too many moving parts. I'd have to give you a question. In fact, comparative advantage, and there's a concept in macroeconomics called bank balance sheets. The only way to learn it is by doing it. Is to sit down and do a practice question. Like, oh, yeah, I see it now. So for comparative advantage, if you're really stuck and confused with that, definitely, please watch that video. And I made a new video about terms of trade in the beginning of the year in August. I made another video about that as well. There is something called a sunk cost. Where is that? Is that in here, or is that later on? I don't see it actually in here. Oh, it is right there. They don't really have too many questions about sunk costs, but the idea is important. The idea is if there's a cost that you can't get back, then it shouldn't be part of your decisions moving forward. So let's say you put a bunch of money in the stock market and you lose $10,000 in the stock market. And then, you sell the stocks and there you are. You shouldn't factor in the loss that you made to making decisions later. In other words, you shouldn't be like, okay, well, I got to make that money back up. The money's gone. It's a sunk cost. You factor it out of your decisions moving forward. So it's a cost that you cannot recoup, and it's in the past. Great. I love it. Again, people keep asking about terms of trade and comparative advantage, and it is important. The quick and dirty, you watch my video. I love it. Let's talk about utility. I do think that this is going to be on this year's AP exam. I think there's going to be a question on this. Utility maximizing, like I said before, they give you 2 different goods and they say, you're consuming 2 goods. Here's your total utility. You have to calculate your margin utility, and you have to divide that margin utility by the price it costs to get it. So it's called margin utility per dollar. So if you're calculating the value you get from something divided by the price, that helps you compare 2 different things, right? You can compare, something really expensive and something else by dividing by the price and kind of puts it in like terms. But it's one of those things you have to practice. They've asked the question several times in previous exams. If you want to know which ones, and this is a good thing. If you haven't already done this, go to my website. If you need to, I've got this right here. This is a breakdown on the AP free responses they've asked in the past. I just updated it to include last year's. But when you go to the website, acdcecon.com, click on students and then free responses for micro, and you can see a breakdown of what they've asked and when. So if you're like, I really want to see a utility maximizing question, get in there, go find out which year they gave one, click on it, or go and Google, search on Google, and you'll go find the answers and the question real easy. Cool. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Other questions people are asking about. These are all kind of coming in at different speeds. We're going to move into unit 2 in a second. Oh, whew, there's a lot of you. Yeah, boy. The equation for margin utility is the same equation for, in fact, let's back up. Marginal is the most important concept in this entire class. Yeah, the idea of marginal analysis, looking at the marginal benefit and the marginal cost, marginal revenue, marginal cost, marginal revenue product, marginal resource cost. It's all the same stuff. The equation is the change in the total divided by the change in the quantity. Now, students, when they're calculating margin utility, yes, usually on the test question, they'll say, okay, 1 unit gives you 10 utils, 2 units gives you 15 utils. And so you go, oh, yeah, it's just the difference between the two. Yeah, but technically the equation is the change in the total divided by the change in the number of units. In other words, they've never really asked this, but they could go up by 5. See what I'm saying? So 5 more units gave you 10 more utils of satisfaction. And so it's not going to be, the total amount. You have to divide that by the additional amount that's going up, if that makes sense. I'm going to keep moving on to the next unit, if that's okay, because unit 1 is actually the least important of all the units. This is a lot more important. It obviously starts off with demand, supply. Elasticity is going to be big. Go download that equations practice sheet. Do those practice questions for elasticity if you need help with those. What are some of your questions here inside this particular unit of things I can come up with? By the way, what's the utility maximizing rule? That is, it's a concept. It's you maximize utility. This is back in unit 1, by the way, by looking at the additional utility per dollar spent of some product, some good you're consuming, and then comparing that to the margin utility per dollar spent of the other product. And if this one gives you $5 of satisfaction or 5 units of satisfaction per dollar spent, and this one gives you 2, then keep doing this one, right? Keep doing the one that gives you more satisfaction per dollar spent until they equal each other. And that's the utility maximizing rule. Cool. I'm going to keep going. You know what, you guys, I like how you're asking. I can tell you guys are smart because you're asking questions on harder things. For example, someone just said, and it just disappeared on me, the idea of the midpoint formula. Where are you? Okay, I don't see where it is. Someone had mentioned it, so I apologize. I'm not sure who it is, but the midpoint formula is a more accurate way of finding if demand is elastic or inelastic. You don't need it on the AP exam. So if you know it, cool, you can use it. And the question the answer you'll get is correct, and the graders will say that's correct, but you don't need it to calculate it when we're talking about elasticity. On here, a lot of people are asking, there it is. Should we know the midpoint formula? No. Do we need to know calculus? No. A lump sum tax. This is actually a pretty important concept. Is this in here? I don't see. I think that comes later on. But a lump sum tax, the lump sum tax versus the per unit tax. I'll talk about that actually later. It doesn't really fit in this unit. Tariffs and quotas, they don't really ask that many questions about it, quite frankly. In other words, you've got to know, here's the big things you got to know. Ceilings and floors, got to know those. You've got to know taxes. You gotta understand those, and then the next level will be tariffs and quotas, and that giant box of consumer surplus you get when you trade. Let me show you what I'm talking about, so I'm not speaking in like riddles to you guys. Let me show you and be a little bit more specific. Okay, over here, this is on the ultimate cheat sheet. This is the second page. Supply and demand with trade. So one of the things you'll be able to draw. Usually it's not draw. They'll either give you the graph, but understand the concept, maybe demand and supply. This is the price in our own country. But if we can buy it at a cheaper world price, then it would be down here. Now, what a lot of students do is they go, oh, okay, the price is down here. So this is like a price ceiling, right? No, it's not a price ceiling. That's not the concept at all. The price, if we produce it ourselves, is $5, whatever this is. But if we can get it for $2 from another country, great. All right, let's go import this. Let's go get this product. So this is not the idea of a ceiling. And a lot of students think, oh, well, where's consumer surplus? Well, first of all, this is the quantity that we're going to produce domestically. So I'll put Q1 there. And then over here, this is the quantity that we're actually consume. I'll put that Q2. This distance is not a shortage. This is how much we're going to import. So we're going to import this quantity. Whatever that quantity is, we're going to import it, which means consumer surplus is, let's get a better pen here. Consumer surplus, this is not the best pen for this, is going to be here. Go all the way down and over. So consumer surplus is huge when you trade. This is the benefits of trading with other countries. Consumers benefit. Who's worse off? Well, producers get less producer surplus. There's no deadweight loss. When we talk about tariffs and quotas, pretty much this is the idea of trade. A tariff would be if there's a $1 tariff on this that raises this from $2 to $3. And so now the consumer surplus is going to be a little smaller, right? Producer surplus is going to be a little bigger. And then we end up with this tariff, which is the dollar amount, $1 times the amount that we import now. So it's this box here. I don't want to, what I'm afraid of doing is getting into all these little tiny details and losing the people who are trying to get a 3 or, a low 4, because I'm trying to help the people who want a 5. But this is kind of the idea of tariffs. And maybe what you'll see. But notice, since it's on the second page, that means it's not important. As important. That's important, but not it. So you're trying to get a 5 if you're doing this. The only one that's on the second page that you absolutely need to know is the idea of game theory and dominant strategy. First page is more important stuff, right? Production possibilities curves, ceilings, floors, monopolies competition. Make sure you know those things first before we cover this one. Okay. Autarky. This is the idea of, it's just a word. It's actually in the College Board's little paperwork. I've never seen it on the test. Basically, it's the idea of being completely self-sufficient, not trading at all with other countries. So the opposite of open trade, like abandoning all trade with other countries entirely. If that makes sense. Okay, go over here. All right, I'm going to get to more of your questions. Other concepts, other questions that I see. Okay. All right. First of all, I didn't already say this. I don't know if I did. Thank you so much. I geek out about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff and doing this stuff. Who pays the tax? This is big. This is big. And I really haven't talked much about it, but this is one of those things that you need to feel really comfortable with when it comes to taxes. The idea of taxes, is the idea of, supply shifting to the left, right? When there's a tax, supply shifts to the left, and you get that concept. No problem, easy, right? So you over here, here's demand, here's supply, here's the price, here's the quantity. That's the original price. That original price matters for this example I'm about to show you. When there's a tax, supply shifts to the left, and we end up with a new price, which is right here. I'll put price C for what consumers pay. The vertical distance is the amount of the tax. This is the price that producers receive. And this box is the tax revenue. Again, I have videos that totally go into this in a lot of detail. This is not profit. Remember, this is tax revenue that goes to the government. The concept that you need to understand is the elasticity of this demand curve is going to determine who pays that tax. So the trick is just draw the darn thing out. If you find out, like, for example, draw the same exact graph, same exact shift, except have a super steep demand curve. And then you have a supply curve that shifts the same way, right? Here was the original price. And then you can see here, this box is bigger on the top. So consumers pay more of that tax, right? So again, this is called tax incidence. Woo! This is called tax incidence. The actual numbers will tell you, right, what's going on here. But all you got to really understand is that the more inelastic the demand curve with the same tax, the more consumers pay of that tax. And if the demand curve is vertical, then consumers are going to pay all of it. And Conversely, if the demand is more elastic, then producers pay more of that tax. So who pays more of the tax is a concept you absolutely totally need to know. Most important is being able to calculate it, being able to spot it, right? Understand the vertical distance amount of tax, not this distance. That's not the amount of tax. The tax is the vertical distance, right? Supply curve shifts by the vertical distance. So if this is $4, then this would be $4. It's $4 for every single unit has increased because now these producers also have to pay the tax, right? Good. I'm so glad you brought that up. This idea of who pays the tax. Great call. Great call. Okay. The shifters concepts, that's the basics. You definitely need to know them. Feel really comfortable with the shifters of demand and the shifters of supply. Don't confuse them, right? Understand something that affects producers is supply, something that affects consumers is the demand. But those are going to be the easiest questions in the test, are those demand and supply shifters for sure. Somebody's asking about the Lorenz curve. That's later on. So I love it. I love it. You guys are ahead of me, which is good. It's good to be ahead. I'm also going to do some shout outs in a second, but we're not there yet. People are asking about externalities. Again, that's the next unit. So let's actually move on to unit 3. This is the unit that introduced you to cost curves. This is the unit that introduced you to side-by-side graphs for perfect competition. This is the first time you drew boxes of profit and all that kind of stuff. This is tough stuff. So definitely, spend your time going through this one. Again, people want me to do some shout outs. I get it. Shout out to Mr. King. Yeah. Okay. Someone asked about it earlier, and I promised I'd come back, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Here's a rule. Lump sum taxes. Okay, for a lump sum tax, or a per unit. Remember, this is part of the rule stuff. Now, this could be the same whether it's a subsidy or a tax. Lump sum taxes affect fixed costs, right? Per unit, they affect variable costs. So in both cases, total cost is going to change, right? But in a lump sum, there's no change to the marginal cost. This is the key. This is the key to this thing. A lump sum tax, if you have to pay $300 to the government, just $300, that's not going to affect the additional cost of producing each additional unit. It is going to affect your profit, right? But it's not going to affect your marginal cost. A per unit tax or subsidy will affect marginal cost. And so, therefore, the output will change. So output will change when it comes to a per unit tax or subsidy. Output stays the same. Now, at this point, it might just be one of those things you just have to memorize. Honestly, just memorize. Lump sum tax, output stays the same. Because if you know that probably is going to get you through 80% of the questions. The question will say, assume there's a lump sum tax on perfect competitive firm, which the following is true. The answer is quantity stays the same. Price and quantity aren't going to adjust. The profit's going to change, and the average total cost is going to change, but the marginal cost doesn't. I hope that helped you out. That is a key concept that you definitely are going to need to know. I love it. I absolutely love it. I love these more shout outs. Yeah. Shout out to your teachers. Let me do a couple of shout outs real quick. By the way, did that help you with the lump sum? Did that help? ATC, hopefully that helped you out. The average total cost is going to change in both of them, right? Average total cost changes, but the one affects the quantity, one doesn't affect the quantity. Oh, I love you. I love you too, Mark. I just covered that. You guys are funny. You guys are hilarious. Oh my gosh. More shout outs. Mrs. Douglas. Shout out to Mrs. S. You know what? I was super cool being able to talk with some of my econ teacher friends today and reaching out to them. We are just as nervous as you guys are, believe it or not. This is a good measurement of our teaching and our ability to help students. And so, when my students were in the test, like, I'd just be like, pacing like I'm having another baby. Like it's so exciting working with students and working so hard all year to get to that point. One of the things was asked, but let's get back to content, is the idea of economies of scale. Right? Economies of scale is one of those important concepts that you totally need to know. It's right here in Unit 3. It's kind of in the definitions zone, right? So it's part of the long run cost curves. Economies of scale is the idea right here, long run, increasing, decreasing economies of scale. It's the idea that getting bigger is cheaper. So companies that are producing a lot more output can buy resources in bulk. They can hire giant machines that can, produce more stuff. The total cost is a lot higher. The total cost of producing a car is astronomical. But since you're producing so many cars, the average cost can be a lot less than if you're making cars like by hand at home in your garage. So the idea of economies of scale, you might see on a test question. Most of the time, though, usually it's not the graph you'll see. Usually you'll see some sort of reference to it to like a decreasing average total cost curve. If the average total cost is falling, then that firm would experience economies of scale if they produce more output. Usually you see that with monopolies. Most of the time, monopolistic competition is where you see that concept, but we're not there yet. But this is a huge unit. This unit right here is by far, I would say, the hardest, and definitely one of the most important ones that you guys need to know. Anything else here that you guys need before I do some more shout outs in a few minutes? Okay. I love it. I mean, it's great to see you guys asking for shout outs. Okay. Someone said, let's go over GDP. We're going to do that. We're going to do GDP and macro. Sorry. Okay. Let's go talk about this next unit. This probably you have the most questions, unit 4. Monopolies, right? You got to know monopoly graph. You got to feel really comfortable doing that. You've got to feel really comfortable with game theory, finding dominant strategy. Like I said, I'll hang out longer if you want, instead of just an hour if students want to go over the real specifics. Right now, I want to answer some of your questions. If you see some of the questions, here's the sort of questions you're going to see on a monopoly. So question, can you do these things? First one you're going to see, first they'll give you a graph. And this little worksheet, this is one of the, just like the practice sheet inside the Ultimate Review Packet. You have to identify the price and quantity. So can you find that on here? Can you find the total revenue? Can you find the total cost? Can you find the box of profit? And make sure, here's the things students make mistakes on. Obviously, the quantity is where MR equals MC. There's a quantity. And then for whatever reason, they want to use this price. They want to say, oh, $40 is something. $40 is nothing. Where MR equals MC, that dollar amount is nothing. The only reason you're trying to find that is for the output. So MR equals MC gives you a quantity. You want to go price up to the demand curve. So the price is 100. So $700 would be a total revenue. The profit box is here. So I know you know this, but it's just a reminder, a thing to keep in mind. Never under any circumstances, because you're going too fast and you're nervous on the test, students will go down here and over. Don't do that. Profit box is right there. This firm is maximizing profit at MR equals MC. Other questions you might see is, where is deadweight loss and can you calculate it? You'll also see the idea of socially optimal, which is where the marginal cost hits demand curve. This socially optimal quantity, what society wants is 10 units, and this monopoly is only producing 7 because it's maximizing profit. Probably the one you'll see the most, in fact, when I did my fear response breakdown, they really ask it a lot with monopolies, is where is total revenue maximized? I know we're not actually running through these questions, but understand the idea of where total revenue is maximized on that graph. Can you spot that? Can you see? I'll just focus on the graph, but where is total revenue maximized and how do you figure that out? Well, total revenue maximized right here at 9. So total revenue maximized. Profit maximizing is when MR equals MC, but total revenue maximizes is when MR equals 0. The marginal revenue hits 0, the total revenue has hit a peak, and then it's going to start going back down. They ask that so much. So again, these are the kind of questions you're going to see. Price and quantity, where is the total revenue, where is the total cost, where is the profit, where is socially optimal, where is total revenue maximized. Again, by the way, if you're freaking out, I have free responses that cover all this stuff. Like literally this document, a different version of the same document is in the Ultimate Review Packet. So practice that if you need to. You also might see the elastic and inelastic range, right? That's actually kind of important. So that where the MR, that's kind of off center, where the MR hits 0, there's an elastic. It's a good way to memorize. It's alphabetical. This is the elastic range, and this is the inelastic range of that demand curve. So demand curve on this side, when the price goes down, total revenue is going up, so it's elastic. On this side, price is going down, total revenue is going down, so it's inelastic. So that's another concept you'll see. And then the last concept you might see is that there's a lump sum or a per unit tax. In fact, let me ask this question for you. What's going to happen to the price and quantity? So what happens to price and quantity if there is a lump sum tax? So lump sum tax, what's going to happen to price and quantity? Right before price was 100, quantity was 7. What's going to happen? The answer is nothing. I just covered that. Nothing. You know that. Lump sum tax, quantity does not change. A lump sum subsidy, quantity does not change. So don't worry about a lump sum doing anything. Just a lump. Nothing's going to change. Yes, the ATC is going to change. Yes, they'll make less profit if there's a tax, but the quantity they produce is going to stay exactly the same. Those are the main things that you're going to see. I love it, right? Some people are saying right here, right? Josiah knows what I'm talking about. He said, right, going to stay the same. Shout out to Mrs. Beaver. Hope that's a real name. Let's see. Productive and allocative. Allocative is just the same as socially optimal. It's where the marginal cost hits the demand curve. So feel comfortable with that one. More shout outs. The shout outs are coming too fast. I love it though. I absolutely love it. You guys are awesome. Again, there we go. Shout out to Mr. Darp. Shout out to Mrs. Weiser. Anyways, okay. Let's go back to the things that you need to know in this unit here, right? You've got it. So you know what? I know what I'm going to do. So you want something, I'm going to give you something. This is more of an overview concept, but it's something I wanted to show you in my predictions video, but I ended up not doing it because I didn't want that video to be too long. Let me show you. This is going to get ugly. If you can't tell, my handwriting is crap. There are 4 market structures: perfect competition, monopoly competition, oligopoly, and monopoly, right? You should feel really comfortable with me talking about this and understanding. This one is different, right? This one's special. Perfect competition has some things. It's the only one that's a price taker. So if it's a price taker, it's the only one where the demand equals the marginal revenue, and they're both horizontal. So horizontal demand equals Mr. Darp. That's what's special about this one. There's something else that makes it special. It's the only one that is efficient in the long run. It has both types of efficiency. It has productive efficiency and allocatively efficient. So perfect competition is a special thing. It's the only one that has side-by-side graphs, right? You draw side-by-side graphs. And so that concept there. These are all called imperfect competition. For all of these are price makers. So they're price maker. And so the demand is greater than the marginal revenue, right? So instead of having a horizontal demand curve, these all have over here the demand and the marginal revenue looking like this, like we just worked on earlier. Cool. You got that. That's great. All right. Now, of these, the only thing you really got to know is this is special because it has game theory. And we can talk about that in a second if we can practice if you want as well. And this one's special, marginal cost is not marginal cost, monopoly competition, is because it shares with perfect competition no profit in the long run. Okay. So these two, there's no profit in the long run because there's low barriers, right? This one has game theory. These other ones all have a demand curve that is above the marginal revenue, except for price discrimination, which is a special type of monopoly. Right? So there is really one more concept, which is a price discriminating monopoly. Discriminating monopoly. That price discriminating monopoly does have a demand that's equal to the marginal revenue. Again, I can cover that later if you want. I don't want to get it. Remember, this is the things you got to know to get the, a 3 on the test. This one is like, okay, it's okay if you don't know it. I can cover it and draw it later on if you want, but I want to move on to the next units. Cool. I don't know if that visual will help you out. At the very least, it's a reminder of something that you guys already know. Ooh, watch this. How about this? A natural monopoly. 1 year, in fact, it was last year, they asked a free response question about a natural monopoly, and they asked, how do you know this is a natural monopoly? Just by looking at it. How do you know? So let's go back to this one. I think I actually have a blank copy of this. I do not. This one I drew earlier, or you saw earlier. Is that a natural monopoly? And how do you know? Well, first of all, I know it's kind of ugly with this other stuff happening here, but let's zoom in on it and let's see. Are you a natural monopoly? Well, this is socially optimal. where the marginal cost hits the demand, and the average total cost is going back up, right? It's going to hit a minimum and go back up. This is not a natural monopoly. Again, how do I know? Is because the average total cost is increasing at the socially optimal quantity. At that socially optimal, ATC is going up. If you want a natural monopoly, you're going to need to draw it differently. Now, usually they don't have you draw it. They usually have a graph that's already there. But let's draw it real quick. Here's quantity, here's price, here's demand, marginal revenue. Great, awesome, you got that. I'm going to draw marginal cost down here, marginal cost. Then I'm going to draw an ATC that's going to go down, hit a minimum, then start going back up. Notice that's a lot flat. So question is, where is socially optimal? That's the first thing you have to be able to spot. When we know this is profit maximizing, we're not talking about that. We're talking about socially optimal. Marginal cost hits demand. This is the quantity, socially optimal. What's going on with the ATC at socially optimal? Well, ATC is falling. If ATC is going down at socially optimal, then it's a natural monopoly. In other words, it's better to have one firm producing this quantity because they can do it at the lowest possible cost. Nobody else, like you, in theory, you could have multiple monopolies and it would be, the costs to produce them would be good, but this is better to have only one. One firm can produce electricity at the lowest cost than having two competing or three competing firms. That's a natural monopoly. Thank you so much for that question, Genevieve. It is a great question, and it's awesome. Someone asked about monopoly competition versus perfect competition. I did kind of cover that a little bit. Graphically, you do need to know monopoly competition in the long run. So let me give you a trick. In fact, let me give you two things here. Watch this. Because I see too many teachers make this mistake. So don't make the mistake. Let's do monopolist competition in the long run. If you want to draw it with me, cool. You want to race me, let's do ahead to that too. So grab your pen. Let's see if you can beat me on this. Here we go. You got demand. You got marginal revenue. You got marginal cost. Notice it's exactly the same as a monopoly, the way it starts. You would produce where MR equals MC. There's your quantity. Quantity is here, right? Price up to demand. Here it is, and over. Price. Now, question, just by looking at this, are they making profit or loss just by looking at the graph? You can't tell because you need to know the ATC. So question is, where does the ATC go? If I put it down here, then they'd be making profit. If I put it up here, they're making a loss. But I want it in the long run. Long run means they're making no economic profit. ATC's got to go through here. So I'm going to give you a trick. One of the tricks is this. Draw a star right here. The reason why is you can't have any gap. You can't draw this and have a little bit of white on your paper or else the grader, your AP exam grader is like, no, they're not tangent. You want to go through here, down to the marginal cost and up. ATC is here. This is monopolist competition in the long run. They're making no economic profit. This is one of the key graphs they have asked on the first fit response. In fact, it's the only the graphs they ask on the first fit response are perfect competition, side-by-side graphs. They ask monopoly, or a few times they've done that graph right in front of you. Can you draw it? Can you? I hope you can. I hope you can. One thing I don't want to see you do, never do this. You got demand, you got marginal revenue. I'm going to redraw it real quick. Watch this. Don't do this mistake. Marginal cost is here. Here's the price. There's the quantity. Two things I don't want to see. Number one, I don't want to see a gap here. That's why I draw the stars. It kind of like pulls the ATC. It forces these things to be tangent because obviously touching. In fact, you can make a giant dot. That might help too, right? But right here, don't do this. Ready? A lot of students do this. They go like this. They go, okay, right? Like that. ATC. It's tangent here, right? I mean, it's hitting this point. It's hitting this point. This one is correct. This one's wrong. That is incorrect. It's got to go up here, tangent, and then go, but never go underneath the demand. Why? Well, if you drew this, and this is the ATC, you're telling me there's some quantity here where the price is above the ATC, and we're making profit, guys. So with this graph, you're saying that there's some profit that could be made by this firm, right? If they just produce less output, which is below the output of maximizing profit, that's just silly. The ATC's got to start up here, go down, hit a minimum, then go back up. Now notice, look at my graph, guys. Look at my graph. Look at my ATC. First of all, I'm sorry I'm drawing so fast. They're kind of ugly. I know this freaks out some people, but my ATC is not at a minimum. It kind of looks like it's going back up. They're not going to freak out about that in the AP test. They really aren't. But understand the idea this is going to go down, hit a minimum, then go back up, right? So there it is. I don't know if that helped you. is it Nile? But I hope it did. Okay, I can come back later. Let's go talk about Unit 5. The truth is, there's a few students, and in fact, there's a good amount of students whose teachers started running out of time in Unit 5 and Unit 6. So these are the concepts and the things that I think we definitely need to talk a little bit about. I am okay. So someone asked about game theory. So at this point, what you want to do for game theory, it's kind of like comparative advantage. You got to learn by doing it. So you got to sit down and you got to practice calculating and finding game theory. So the tricks for this is, okay, if Clifford Airlines charges for bags and then they don't, so feel comfortable doing this. I've got questions in the Ultimate Review Packet. I have a ton of videos that cover it too. There's other videos out there as well, but I can't cover it now, game theory, simply because it's going to be too long of a process. The going over each question. Now, I can in a few minutes, and maybe at the very end, if a lot of people want to do it, I can do that. But let's go talk really quick about Unit 5. Okay, in Unit 5, it's a very short unit. There's really only 2 skills and one graph, 1 skill. I'll start over. 1 graph, 2 skills, and another kind of important graph you need to know. What do I mean by that? In Unit 5, here's what you need. Okay, let me give you a quick breakdown of the 2 skills that you need. First thing you need to do is this. In Unit 5, you're going to be able to calculate MRP and MRC using this rule to hire workers. So using the MRP, MRC rule and hire workers. So they'll give you the, gosh, my handwriting's so bad. Now you know why I type so much, guys. They'll give you a chart and they say, 1 worker produces 10 output, 2 workers produce this. And then you have to figure out, okay, how much revenue do these workers generate and how much cost is each worker? Then I'm going to hire workers with the MRP equals the MRC. So that's skill number 1. Skill number 2 is something called the least cost rule. This one, less students feel comfortable with this one. The idea of least cost rule is they're going to give you the marginal benefit of some labor, some worker, and you have to multiply, not the marginal benefit, I apologize, the marginal product of some worker, how much additional output they work, times the wage of that labor, and you have to compare it to the marginal product of some capital or machine divided by the price of that machine. Now, it seems more confusing. That equation seems like, that's really ugly equation. But it's actually the same exact thing you do in Unit 1 with utility maximizing. It's exactly the same idea. In Unit 1, remember we talked about it, you got 2 things you're consuming. You consume the one that gives you the most utility per dollar spent. And you keep doing that until you either run out of money or they equal each other. This is the same concept, except hiring workers. How much additional output you're getting from your worker divided by the cost of that worker, and you're comparing that to the additional output of some machine, some capital, divided by the price of that machine. And if this one gives you more output per dollar spent, you keep hiring more workers. And eventually that number starts to fall because of the law of diminishing marginal returns. So you keep hiring these workers until these things equal or until you run out of money, basically the idea. Now, the way this looks in the test is they'll say, okay, the marginal product of the, they'll say a firm is, it has got the lowest possible costs, and the marginal product of labor is 20. The wage is $10. The marginal product of capital is 50. What is the price of capital? What is the price of those machines? Right? I mean, it's like, well, it's $25, right? So this is half. This needs to be half. That's it. You'll actually see questions just like that. Literally, that's all they'll say. But it looks confusing because they're giving you all these numbers, and they're just like, what? If the marginal product of labor per dollar spent is 2, or it's not dollars, actually it's 2 output per dollar spent, then this needs to also equal 2 if they've already achieved the least cost rule. That makes sense. Again, this is not dollars. This is output per dollar spent. Just like in Unit 1, it's utility per dollar spent. All right. Okay. So 2 skills. Hiring workers. Can't see a thing. I know this is ugly. Hiring workers is a skill you need to know. Least cost rule is something you need to know. In terms of graphs, you need to know the side-by-side graphs for a perfectly competitive firm hiring workers. So you know this is the wage and the quantity. This is demand. This is supply for labor. There's a horizontal supply curve, not a demand curve. This is the marginal resource cost. You have a downward sloping demand, which is the marginal revenue product. This is a key graph. In fact, I would argue that this is the biggest sleeper graph in the entire class, because you spend all this time in perfect competition and monopolies, and then you did monopoly competition and supply and demand. You spend a ton of time with. Your teacher starts running out of time, and they throw this at you, and it looks different. And students are like, what? This is the graph that will give you so much benefit knowing how to draw it, because so many other students don't know how to draw this graph and they forget. So this is a perfectly competitive firm hiring workers in the resource market. So this is the market in a firm, but this is not products. So this is not, let's say, oranges. These are the people picking oranges, the workers picking oranges. There also is no ATC here. There's no ATC. There's no box of profit. You're not drawing or labeling anything. This is the entire graph. So that's what you need to know. The last thing I'm going to write down is a monopsony, which is a monopoly for labor. It's a concept. You're more likely to see it on the concept on a question where they'll say, okay, what is a monopoly? They haven't asked a free response on it very often. They could, but it's never been the main graph. In other words, for these side graphs I keep mentioning, there's never been a free response where it's been that is the entire graph that the entire question is on. They have done a monopsony once, but it was like 7 years ago, and it was on like a Form B question. And it was like, if you understand hiring workers enough, you could follow the rules enough to feel comfortable with it. Since you're going to ask me in the comments anyways, I'm going to go over what a monopsony looks like. So take a look. You've got quantity, you've got price, you've got a upward sloping supply curve. You've got a marginal resource cost that goes up twice as fast. And you have a demand, which equals the marginal revenue product. I know you saw this in my other video. Notice that it is basically an inverted monopoly. So a monopoly has a downward sloping demand and marginal revenue that goes down twice as fast, and a marginal cost that goes up, right? So it's basically, if you understand this, then you kind of understand this. It's inverted. So just follow the same rules. You always you always produce where MR equals MC. There's your quantity. And so you always hire where MRP equals MRC. So that's your quantity of workers hired. Okay, cool. Now the price isn't here. You know that price is up to the demand curve. So there's the price for monopoly. So for this one, you're tempted to go, well, here we go, price. But that doesn't make sense. If you're a monopoly for labor, if you're the only firm hiring workers in a small town, then you're not going to pay them a high wage. You're going to pay them a low wage, right? So this is the wage right here. And you can see what's going on here. Whenever there's a monopoly or a monopsony, right? This is where perfect competition would be, where supply equals demand. They're holding back production, charging a higher price, which makes sense, right? Quantity is low and price is higher for monopoly. What's happening here? Well, quantity is low, so they're hiring fewer workers. And what's with the wage? They're hiring at a lower wage. They're hiring workers, which makes sense, right? If you're a monopoly for labor, you're gonna hire fewer workers, and you're gonna pay them a lot less than you otherwise would in a perfectly competitive market where those workers can go find other jobs. There's other places for them to work. I've spent some time on this because I know you're going to ask anyways, but the truth is this. Oh, someone caught me. You're right. Someone caught me. Look at you guys. I love it. I love it when you guys catch me because I'm going too fast. Someone said this should be wage, not price. You're totally right. 100%. Wage. Now, if you did on the test, students always ask, like, what if I did on a test? Am I screwed? No, like price of labor, it's not going to kill you. What would kill you is if they tell you to label the wage 1, and let's say you did this. Let's say you did this and you did wage 1 here, and they tell you label it 1, but you label 2 things wage 1, then you're not going to get the point. Or if you don't label it like this, they tell you label wage 1, the wage for a monopsony, and you don't label either one of them wage 1, then you get in trouble. So just make sure to label it what they tell you to actually label it on the test. Okay, good question. Another person said, why is the marginal factor cost? This is the marginal factor cost, marginal resource cost. The reason why, I'll explain it quickly, is when you hire workers and you're a monopsony, right? you can hire somebody at some really low wage. Someone's willing to work for $2 an hour. I can pay them $2 an hour. If I want to hire the next worker, then I have to increase the wage of this next worker and the worker that that's willing to work for less, right? So now I'm going to hire the next person for $5, but I can't hire the previous person for $2, right? That's called wage discrimination. I can't do it. So I have to pay them both $5. So if I want more workers, I got to pay them a higher wage. And if I pay them a higher wage, the marginal factor cost is going to be higher than the actual wage that worker is willing to pay. So willing to get paid. So it's the same idea with a monopoly. Remember with a monopoly, to sell another unit, they have to lower the price of the next unit and the units they could have sold for a higher price. It's the same idea, except it's applying to supply and workers. Okay, that was unit 5. I did it fast. I know. But those are the main concepts that you need to know. It's a very short unit. Again, the skills are, can you use a chart to calculate how many workers to hire? Can you do the least cost rule? And then do you know the main graph, which is a side-by-side graphs, and the extra graph, which is a monopsony. One last unit we got to talk about. So let's go do it. This is it. This unit is by far, in my opinion, it's the easiest, other than unit 1, it's the easiest unit because it's a rehashing of things you already learned. And there's a few things in there that feel very much like your standard social science class, like some definition things, the types of taxes, proportional, aggressive, regressive. Those are all easy definition questions. The other thing you need to know is public goods, but really just a definition, like public goods as non-exclusion and shared consumption. It's easy. The hardest part is externalities in that one. You got to know how to draw an externality for the AP test. There's a video I made last year that covers it better than I'm going to do now. So if you need externalities, I'm not going to do it here. Go watch that video. It talked about the 2 types. Now, the AP test has recently been very specific on telling students, please draw a negative production externality. So make sure you can draw both sets. There's 2 types of negative externalities and 2 types of positive externalities, right? There's a consumption externality and there's a production externality. And the rule, when you watch my video, you'll find when it comes to negative externalities, there's always going to be 2 cost curves for negative externalities. 2 different sorry. Let me start over. That's not the rule. The rule for negative externalities is that you're always going to be producing too much in the free market. The free market's producing too much with a negative externality. And for a positive externality, the free market's going to underproduce and produce too little. Again, that video is going to do better than I ever could right now. One of the questions someone just asked, is there any oligopoly graph? There's something called a kink demand curve that might be in your book, but that graph is usually not something I've never seen on the test before. So I would not put it on there on a list of things to do. Was there shout out to Mr. Barron? To the Baron, Mr. Barron that I know? These things are moving too fast, guys. I try to do a shout out and find, but you guys disappear too fast. Let me do some shout outs here real quick. Let's do some shout outs. Yeah. Dudek. Okay. Shout out to Mikey Hong. Is that just you? Yeah. More shout outs. Mr. Wang. First of all, I know a lot of these teachers from working with them at workshops. So it's absolutely great that these are your teachers and that you guys are such good students. Super cool. Mr. Powell. There we go. Okay. I just hit the 1.5 hour mark and I don't want to take too much more time for this. What I do want to say is a couple things as we get ready and finish up here. So first thing, like I said in the very beginning, thank you so much for watching my videos and engaging with this material. Do me a favor, for your entire life, apply these concepts. So taking a step away from the AP test that you're going to do rock, you're going to be amazing, you're going to do awesome. Taking a step away from that and just appreciate all the concepts you're learning and apply them in your life. So there's, supply and demand, all that stuff, but really maximizing profit, thinking like an economist, all those concepts. You might not draw those graphs if you ever run a business someday, but the concepts you're going to be using all the time. And that's what's really important. Last couple of shout outs I'll throw out here. Someone asked specifically about the Lorenz curve. It's not something I'd spend time on at all. It's definitely not something you have to draw by any means. Scotty Jones. Oh, there's so many people, so many shout outs. Mr. Perry, so many shout outs. I love it. Landis. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the point is this, there's a lot more practice in the ultimate review packet. If you need help with free responses, you can take a look at that. The next time I'm going to see you will be for our next macro review if you're taking the macro exam. Otherwise, I can't wait to see how well you guys do on the free responses and on the test. In 3 days from now, I'm going to make 3.5 days from now, I'll make a video going over the answers to those free responses. So come back, watch that video, and then see how you actually did. And we can see how my predictions were, and we can see the predictions that other teachers made. Long story short, thank you so much for coming out. Shout out to Mr. Clifford. I appreciate it, Sean. Shout out to you, Sean. Thanks so much for watching my videos. You guys are amazing and awesome. Till next time.